please ask questions at the end. So Routledge. Routledge is an imprint of Taylor and Francis. You might also be aware of CRC Press, which is another imprint of Taylor and Francis. So Taylor and Francis is like the umbrella, and then Routledge is humanities, social sciences books, and CRC Press does publishes like STEM subjects. We have a journals division of Taylor and Francis, but in terms of kind of working practices, it's pretty separate to the books division. So yeah, I mean, I always say I work for Routledge, and people generally know who we are. It was founded in 1851, so we've been publishing for almost 200 years. We've published some of the greatest thinkers of the last century. So I've just put some examples on the slide. Judith Butler, Freud, Derrida, Albert Einstein, Adorno, loads of people like that. I also just found out actually today that we published Stalin, like in translation, in the 1920s. So yeah, learned something new. We publish now about 7,500 books every year. So we have a massive backlist of kind of, I think, 200,000 plus books. We are also a top 3 publisher of open access books. So open access makes published academic research freely available online, so anyone anywhere can read it. We've been publishing open access journals, or Taylor and Francis have been publishing open access journals since 2006, and about 10 years ago we complemented it, or started to complement it, with our books program. So we can publish books open access, so they're freely available online under a Creative Commons license. We can do full books or individual chapters. It does need funding. So at the moment, kind of Scandinavian countries are kind of leading the field, or like the open access research at the moment. I think in the US it's a lot less common at the moment, but I do think this is kind of the future of research. So yeah, we're definitely ramping up open access. So considering all of that, considering that we publish almost 8,000 books a year, as a whole, the built environment team publishes around 175 books every year. So subjects on architecture, interior design, urban design planning, landscape architecture, and mainly for students, professionals, and scholars. There's 4 editors in the team. So I'm editor for architecture, based in the UK, but my remit is the US, so US authors and some Asian authors. Fran is senior publisher based in the UK for architecture. Kate Shell is senior editor for urban design, planning, landscape, and she's based in the US, but her remit is global. And Caroline Church, she also started kind of towards the end of last year, and she's dedicated to like built environment research. So she does research monographs, handbooks, that kind of thing. There hasn't been like a dedicated editor in that area for a little while. So yeah, we're kind of expecting to see growth there. So who do we sell to? So in the built environment team, We mostly sell to professionals, followed by students and libraries. That's not the same across the whole of Routledge. Student library channels are kind of more a bigger chunk of that. But in the built environment, we publish quite a lot for professionals, which I think is actually exciting. Like, it's really exciting because practitioners are at the forefront of, making like real change in the world. So I think, the fact that we can sell to professionals is really a good thing. In the US, I think the student market is a slightly bigger chunk than on the screen. But yeah, those are the three channels that we sell to. There's obviously crossover, which I'll go into later. And we do sell to bookshops as well, so we can reach like a more general reader. But primarily library, student, professional. And marketing is split as well based on that. So we have a faculty marketing team, professional team, institutional team, and an author marketing team. And similarly with sales, we have corporate sales teams who focus on deals with institutions, and sales teams that kind of focus on faculty and sell textbooks to educators, try to get textbook adoptions, and then a library sales team who sell to libraries. And then also our sales colleagues go into bookshops and sell the books there. We print and stock our books in the US, UK, Singapore, and Australia. And we distribute Reba books outside the UK. So we print on location, and I think that really helps with distribution globally. In architecture, UK and US are our main markets. We also have a really, really good rights team, and they're ramping up kind of Chinese translations, especially. They do a lot of translations, but recently we've seen a lot of Chinese translations of our books. So what do we actually publish in architecture? So like I said, it's split into three main channels: library, student, and professional. So the library market, we publish handbooks or companions. So these are lengthy edited volumes looking at a topic, a big topic from a broad perspective. Oh, well, taking a broad look on a big topic. And then they're often interdisciplinary, or they're looking at it from a variety of different perspectives. They're international and diverse list of contributors. They're normally about 30 to 40 chapters, so kind of a hefty book. And then monographs, research monographs, Routledge Research in Architecture series. It's probably, I think, our most comprehensive series. So these are research books on emerging topics, mostly used by scholars and upper level students, not necessarily used in classes, but they can be, or like certain chapters are used in classes. And those two kind of product types are published in hardback first, and then a paperback will come out around 18 months later. So then textbooks, you should be familiar with textbooks and know what they are, but they cover a topic that's widely taught to students across institutions. It's a little bit obscure, more obscure in architecture, because the way that it's taught in different institutions just varies so much. But yeah, textbooks are written specifically for students. Then professional books, within architecture, these are normally books for architects, not always, but normally they're written by professionals, but also academics. And they should be books that help practitioners to do their jobs better. So maybe they give detail on codes or standards or laws or new empirical data that's useful to an architect, or they could cover advances in technology, how to implement specific design techniques, methods, working practices, that kind of thing. So the Architect's Pocketbook and Passive House Details, they're examples of professional books. There's obviously crossover. So students are not going to be students forever. So the textbook and professional markets kind of blend together sometimes. So modern apartment design and design for social innovation, I put in the corner there, are examples of books that kind of bridge the gap between professional and student audience. This is kind of because architecture's vocational, and because a lot of educators are also practicing architects, I think it's truer in this subject than others that there's this crossover between the professional and student market. So yeah, we're very aware of that, and we can publish books specifically for that market. And then there's also crossover between the library market and the textbook kind of student market, as you would expect. So books with student appeal that might be used in classes but not necessarily written as textbooks, we can publish in paperback. So examples of that are in the top right hand corner. They're often edited collections. So we do some books that are based on conferences or symposia, and yeah, that's quite a common kind of format. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea of what we publish. I also wanted to just briefly talk about design, because I think as Routledge, we have a reputation of publishing quite text-heavy books. And on the architecture list, that's not always the case. So I've just put some examples there of kind of heavily illustrated books with a nice design. We have a lot of flexibility and kind of freedom to do what we want with different books for different markets. So it's kind of, yeah, another side of Routledge that maybe not as many people are familiar with. We're also rebooting our Instagram page. It's like an editorial run page, so basically Fran and me. So yeah, please follow us. And I think, yeah, it's just basically a chance for us to showcase what we're publishing, and because people don't really look at books in bookshops anymore, it's just a nice space for us to show you what we're doing. Okay, so the next part of the presentation is focused on how to turn your ideas into books, or how to turn an idea into a book. So, so if you have an idea for a book, that might be based on your teaching or your research or practical work that you've been doing. The first question you need to ask really is it actually a book? Because if it's time sensitive, or if it's narrowly focused, or if it's quite specialist, it might be better suited to a journal. They can publish quicker than us, and on narrower topics. So firstly, is it really a book? Then you need to think about your message. So nail down the message. What are you writing? Why are you writing it? And why are you writing it now specifically? So what makes it important to current debates in architecture? Is it relevant to students now if you're writing for students? What makes it important? Like, why do your ideas really matter? If it's a textbook, yeah, how does it reflect how students are taught? If it's a research book, does it build on current debates? Just make sure it's not outdated. And you need to think about who it's for. So be specific. If you have a specific reader in mind, your book is going to be more effective. It's not just about helping us kind of find a route to market. You really need to know who you're writing for. And you need to think about why they need the book. So specifically, why does that audience need your book? What unique selling points do you have? Which leads on to competition. So what's already out there? And how is your book different to what's on the market? I think that's important for every kind of book, but especially if you're targeting a large student audience, because yeah, it's hard to establish a new textbook. It can be hard to establish a new textbook on a subject that loads of people have written about before. And there's loads of books out there, including, 8,000 of our Routledge books every year. So what makes your book unique? Maybe you've found a gap you've noticed a gap in your research or a gap in your teaching career, and you want to fill that gap, which would be an ideal place to start. So once you've decided you want to write a book, you've got your message, you know who you're writing for, you need to prepare or start preparing your proposal. So this slide kind of details all the things that you need to include for us to be able to properly assess the proposal. I'm going to go into more detail on some of these things. So you need to think about the title. You need an about the author section or a CV essentially. Yeah, you could write the book alone. You could co-author you could co-edit or edit the book. Just be aware that you don't want to have too many voices, too many different editors, because it can become it's not a cohesive book. You want an author voice to come throughout the book. Readership and market, you need to talk about that. You need a rationale and synopsis. You need a proposed table of content, review of the competition, and timescale. So with the timescale, I would encourage you to be realistic, because we don't really have expectations on that. We publish all year round. We plan years in advance. So you have to be realistic. It's much better to tell us how long you really think you need than to be kind of asking for extensions. Yeah, there are some windows when it's better to publish, but yeah, it really depends on your own schedule. Extent and illustrations. So you need to make an estimate of how many words you plan to write and how many images you think you need. Most of our books are between 200 and 300 pages, which is roughly 70 to 90,000 words if you're including a standard number of illustrations, so 60 to 100. We can go down to kind of 40,000, 60,000 words if it's a heavily illustrated book, so 200 images or more. Yeah, so in your proposal, you should, feel free to say what you think you need and then just be flexible on what we can actually offer. With the illustrations, look at your competition. If it's heavily illustrated, you probably need to do the same. If it's in color, you probably need your book to be in color as well, but not necessarily. And then finally, sample material. So we ask for an introduction, draft introduction, ideally, and maybe another chapter as well, which gives us a sense of your writing style and the kind of work that you do. Don't send the whole book at this point, but do kind of, this is where peer reviewers will really be like assessing your work and your scholarship. So make sure it's of the quality that you would plan to, continue with, because it will be commented on. So I'm just going to go into some of these in more detail. So the title might seem obvious, but it's really important, but at the same time, you don't want to get too attached to a specific title from the beginning, and you don't want to anchor your whole book around this title and include it in all the subheadings, because it might change. We have a view on it. We will have a view on it, so you need to be flexible, maybe come up with a few different options. It's kind of a balance between being too literal and dry, and then being too obscure and using wordplay and puns and that kind of thing, because if you use a made-up word, for example, that you've coined yourself, nobody's going to Google that word, and therefore they probably won't find your book. People don't really find books or come across new books in person anymore. It's all online, so discoverability is really, really important. Think about what keywords you'd use for your book and try and integrate them into the title somehow. Maybe Google the title that you've come up with and see what other results come up, and would your book kind of fit within those, or is it not really working? And yeah, don't leave all the work to the subtitle, because the main title is where it's at, and the subtitle isn't always helpful for discoverability. The readership. So I kind of touched on this before. You need to be really specific, or as specific as you can be. If you're writing for students, what level, which students, which courses. If you're writing if it's a research book, are there any special interest groups or research networks that might be especially interested in it? If it's a professional book, which professionals? Are they specific to one region? So we publish globally, and we have a global market. So ideally, your book would be applicable to, well, would be international. If you're using case studies, try and make them international. Focus on including case studies from the global south. The same with contributors. But yeah, it's also fine if your research or your book is specific to one location, just be clear about that. Yes, and yeah, are you writing for students, professionals, or researchers? It's okay if you think there'll be secondary audiences, but one of them is probably your primary audience, and few books will be equally relevant to all of those markets. So yeah, just be careful not to overstate the market. And I think if you have your audience in mind from the beginning, you'll write a more effective book. Rationale and synopsis. So you need to include around 300 to 500 words explaining why you're writing the book and what your book is about. What is it doing? How is it doing it? What will you achieve? What's your message? Just, yeah, try and be really clear. If you need 1,000 words to explain what you're doing, it's probably not quite ready yet. I'd encourage you to leave this till last. And don't include too much background information. Because yeah, we really need to know what the book is doing and how. So this book will, etc., rather than going into too much detail on the background. You also need to think about selling points. So I didn't include this on the slide, but you should come up with kind of 3 to 5 selling points for your book. So what are your unique selling points? It might be that it uses empirical data or uses case studies that haven't been written about before. Hopefully you'll be able to come up with a few of those. We have to, in editorial, have to sell the book internally to sales colleagues. So this is really helpful for us, so we can see how, yeah, what you think your book is doing that others don't and why you think it's important. So yeah, you need to include a table of content. This is really where you need to go into detail. So try and include chapter headings, chapter abstracts, subheadings, case study details, contributor names and affiliations if it's an edited book. Think quite carefully about the structure. You need an introduction, definitely. Chapters should progress logically and they should relate properly to each other, which maybe sounds obvious, but I think with edited books, sometimes it can read like a collection of essays rather than kind of a cohesive book. Yeah, like I said, case studies, contributors need to be included, and they should be international if possible and diverse. It's kind of hard for us to judge or how diverse your authorship is sometimes, so just keep that in mind. And a conclusion is ideal, which points to future directions. The peer reviewers will kind of comment quite a lot on the table of content. So yeah, there's no such thing as too much information. Include as much as you can, and you should get constructive feedback. And if you don't know what to include, or you have any other questions, or you think you don't know where to start on the structure, you can always just ask us. Competition. So you need to include an assessment of the competition, obviously. It's often the first thing we'll look at, because if you've really assessed the competition and you've thought about it, you've thought about how your book fits in with what's already out there, it just shows to us that you're really committed and you know what you're doing. So you make a list of competing books, or even just books on a similar subject, and explain how your book is different. Try and be honest. On the one hand, you don't be afraid to kind of critique other books. If you really think they're not quite right, explain why. Also, you don't have to critique everything. You can say like, oh, I think this book is really great, but it doesn't hit on this, or my book is different because it does this and this. So just be honest in that section. And yeah, if you don't consider anything to be direct competition, you can definitely say that. Maybe your book, or you consider your book to be the first book on a specific subject, but maybe explain why that is, and look at books that are related to yours. If there aren't any books on the subject and you don't think there's any competition, you might need to kind of rethink whether there's really a market, because we publish a lot, and yeah, it's unlikely that you'd come across something that's really, really brand new, that would have a significant market. So that's a proposal. I've also included just a little bit on academic writing. So try and keep your writing clear and plain. Try not to lecture the reader. You want to kind of engage in a dialogue and write like you're explaining it to kind of like a friend, rather than lecturing somebody. Use active voice. Avoid qualifiers, because it makes your writing sound more hesitant. Don't use too many archaic terms. Vary your sentence structure, and don't overcomplicate, because hopefully your ideas should speak for themselves. So, the publishing process. So once you've submitted a proposal to a commissioning editor, they will assess it internally. If you don't want to submit a full proposal straight away, we're more than happy to kind of guide you through it and talk about specific ideas, help you with the proposal process, so you don't have to feel like you have to come up with the whole thing and then it's either rejected or not. So we'll assess it internally. If we think it has potential and it's a good fit for us, we might ask you to make some edits, or we could send it straight out for peer review. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but so peer review normally takes a month or two, and we just want to gather feedback on the proposal. So once we've got the feedback in, the editor will assess it and make a decision about whether the proposal needs more work, what exactly it needs. Hopefully it's not rejected at this point, but maybe it's just not a good fit for us. But yeah, hopefully feedback is good or constructive and we can continue to work on the proposal. If it's really good, we can go straight to the next step, which is the editorial board meeting. So the editor needs to kind of pitch the book to senior colleagues to get final approval to send a contract. So once we've got good reviews and a good proposal, we can move ahead to the editorial board meeting. Then kind of the specifications of the book are decided. So the length, how many illustrations, how many words, what kind of format and price we want to publish at, if it's going to be a paperback book or a hardback first book, what market are we targeting? And then you'll be sent a contract to sign, and then it's the writing phase. Some authors, experienced authors might just want to be left alone, so that they can write the book. But some newer authors might want to send in chapters as they write them for feedback. So either of those is fine. We kind of just are flexible on whatever the author would prefer. Once the full manuscript is delivered, there are some steps we need to take. Make sure you have all the permissions that you need, that all the images are the right size, that everything will print okay. And then we will send the manuscript to production, which is where you kind of start to communicate with other people in the company. So production, they will copy edit the book, they will typeset it, so they'll lay it all out for you, and proofread, and then print. And kind of in the meantime, we're working on marketing and sales to get ready for publication. The whole production process takes 6 months. I think that's across the board, apart from short form books, which are actually a product type I didn't mention before, but basically research monographs that are under 40,000 words. Sometimes they're based off a PhD thesis, and they're a little bit quicker to publish. So I wanted to just talk about peer review briefly. So we send out manuscripts, proposals for review. It's a single blind review, so they'll know who you are as author, but you won't know who reviewers are. We kind of ask reviewers to comment on the author's reputation. So when you include a CV with your proposal, the reviewer will kind of assess that and just comment on whether you're a suitable author for this project. We ask experts in the subject, so people who know what the trends are, what the hot topics are. They're familiar with the current research, other publications on the same subjects, and they can pick up on errors and omissions, controversies maybe within the proposal, and just assess the level of scholarship a little bit better than we could, because we're not necessarily subject experts. They're also potential customers, so it's kind of in some ways a marketing method. It lets people know that we're potentially publishing this book. Would they actually buy it? So we ask them to assess the market, whether the subject area is growing, or if it's steady, or if it's falling. We ask them to look at the table of content and whether the proposal is structured well. Comment on the scholarship, the author reputation, like I said, strengths and weaknesses of the proposal. If they have any other ideas about competition, whether your assessment of the competition makes sense, and overall whether they recommend that we publish the book. We do ask in the proposal as well for you as author to suggest some reviewers, and we generally use a mixture of your suggestions and our own ideas. Sometimes I get authors who maybe they've written loads before, they've written loads of books before, they have a really good reputation, and I really like the book, and they're kind of maybe confused as to why we still send it out for peer review, or why we try to get so many reviewers. And I think, yeah, it's just an opportunity to shape and improve the book. We don't generally peer review at when the final manuscript is in. So this is where we can like really make sure that it's targeted to the right market, and it's structured well, and that it's the best that it can be. Often, like with a book that I think will do really well, I would want to get more reviewers, just to, yeah, it's an opportunity to shape the book, and also to let people know about it. Yeah, so this is my final slide. I just wanted to briefly talk about what we're specifically looking for, what we like to publish, what the kind of proposals that I like receiving. So professional books, true professional books are books that really help people to do their jobs better. So they might have codes or standards or empirical data that would be really helpful for a professional to have access to. Cutting edge practices, so books that kind of cover advances in technology, materials, different techniques, or books that cover design for specific needs, different building types, different materials. For textbooks, we really need to be publishing new textbooks that reflect how students are taught now, and that address the issues that students are concerned with. So I've just written a few: equity and inclusion, decolonizing the curriculum, and the climate crisis are very important issues at the moment, obviously. And we want to publish new research on emerging topics and current trends. So that's all I had. So if you have any questions, please let us know. Like I said before, if you want to talk specifically about different ideas you have, like maybe you don't have a proposal yet, but you want to talk about, whether your idea has potential, like please get in touch with us. And there is a discount code there, which I believe will give you 20% off on routledge.com. So, yeah.
I can maybe add something from an author perspective, because I published 2 books with Routledge, and one is I found it incredibly helpful because Routledge does not do any editing of your writing, really. And even though I consider myself a very good writer, I really sort of got to the limits of how well I can write in using a type book. And I found it incredibly helpful to pay a professional editor to help me to structure. Basically, I was having to work so quickly to produce the writing, to write the book, that I didn't really have the luxury of letting it sit for a few months, coming back to it again, and then rereading and trying to reshape the chapters. So I found it really helpful to have a second pair of eyes in the form of a professional editor that's helping me to just read through and structure and say, you know, this is the theory of, and make some suggestions there. That was the one thing. And the other thing that I found that Routledge does offer is in books that have an index to them. I was looking at the task of indexing my book, and I threw my hands up over my head and I said, I don't know if I can do this. So Routledge did offer to have a paid indexer create an index for my book, which I found incredibly helpful. I know there's software that does it too, but I wasn't familiar with using it. So I went with Routledge's offer to do that for me. And I never regretted it. So that was just two things from an author perspective that might also help. Got questions?
Thanks, Sandra.
The last study was like three categories of professional students and research that can publish a work. I mean, any students be not, I mean, the title is not around the research trends, like it was like climate change. I mean, that if these students are not working on that part, but they are working on the emerging technologies or new research, then do they consider as a second and a third ranking? I didn't understand the, I mean, that why they, I mean, that categories in the three professionals, students, and research. Why they did that, and should we, I mean, consider one category for us when we are like PhD students and want to publish, for example, our, I mean,
Sorry, Sandra, we didn't really hear that. Could you repeat that? Sorry, you
Yeah,
just spent a really long time.
and actually, I'm not sure if I understand the question entirely. The question was about the three categories that you have. So professional,
Student and research. Yeah, library.
Professional, students, and research. Those are the categories that the books aim at, either the student population, so books for students, not by students, but books for students. Does that
I made
No. It's books that are aimed at student readers, so they're marketed at students, like textbooks, or books that are aimed at academics or institutional libraries, or books that are aimed at professionals of the field. Okay, so there was a. Yeah, it's not. She understood that it was the three categories were the types of people writing and not the market. That you're
I see.
On. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Another question. You want to come up here? Yeah, I think we're going to have to get people up closer to the microphone.
Yeah.
Able to.
About the some more clarity on the typical agreement. I think in terms of finances, in terms of how much faculty or the faculty's department will need to commit to, let's say, the publication of the book. You had mentioned some things like copy editors, image printing costs. How much? What's the balance between what Routledge will kind of finance once they accept the book, and then how much typically, or is there a typical sense of what
Sure.
you're expected to?
Do you want me to speak to this, Lydia?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, that you shouldn't be. Well, Routledge certainly doesn't ask for any contribution towards like printing or paper or manufacturing or distribution or any of that aspect to it. We do the copy edit, we do the proofread, we can also arrange for the indexer. The main things that, or the main kind of monetary draws that you will face as an author are generally third-party permissions, and then of course your time. so that, you know, which is the main cost really. And for a standard contract, you receive a royalty, you know, and for certain projects, you know, if an advance is needed, we can do that, or we can look to the budget for a small permissions fee. So it really depends on the project, the size of the project, the potential market for the project, and kind of, you know, what the needs are there. But certainly in terms of like the business of publishing books, we wouldn't ask you or your institution for any contribution towards that. There is, of course, a completely different model when you're looking at open access publishing. So open access is a completely different kettle of fish, obviously, but I won't get into that. You know, we can talk about that separately if you ever need to.
I guess we come over here. Yes.
Hello, I do have a question for books that has been added by maybe a few scholars, but the contributing authors will be like a much bigger scale. I mean, in that situation, I have two questions. Number one is at which level we can submit a book proposal for that kind of book? You know, should we have to each of the contributing author will confirm their dedication, confirm okay, I'm going to write a chapter for that, or should we just wait their draft is ready to submit the book proposal? So that's my first question. Which level we will submit the book proposal for that kind of book? Number two, I think as the chief editor, you know, for that book, normally those editors will also contribute to one of the chapters of the books, right? So what will be the role difference between the editor for a book like that, in the meantime, as a contributing author, and also you guys? Because it looks like there's some like overlap area between the editing duty. So yeah, that's my two questions.
Okay, Lydia, do you want to take these, or should I?
I didn't quite catch all of it, if you don't mind.
Okay, so in answer to your oh, you've gone. In answer to the first part of the when it comes to when it comes to hello, when it comes to proposals for edited books, like, we appreciate that that you can be at sort of different parts of the development of the book, and so often what I advise editors to do is to really kind of put in their wish list, the ideal individuals that they want to be in there and what they would want them to write about. Because often with the peer review process for edited books, there's normally like a top 3 suggestions for those types of book. One is a stronger theoretical framework. 2 is a slightly different mix of contributors. And inevitably, I've now forgotten my third point. But the point is that they're the shaping that the editor does is often the aspect of those proposals that gets the most scrutiny. So if you can demonstrate in your proposal that you've got a really strong framework and you know exactly what you're trying to say with the volume as a cohesive whole, then you can include in there your ideal contributors for that scenario, with the caveat that you haven't actually asked them yet, and there's a possibility that you'll have to make some changes, and that's completely understood. Does that help? Does that answer the question? Okay, great. And for the second part of the question, which I understood to be kind of what's the relationship between editors, contributors, and the publisher, was that am I right in that understanding? So certainly for an edited book, you have the editors almost certainly write at least the introduction and normally 1 or 2 of the chapters. And so for edited books, you have an editor contract where they have responsibility for the volume as a whole, and then contributor agreements, which go to the individual contributors and are much shorter and just talk about, you know, the fact that they will deliver a chapter on X by such and such time. And if you're the editor, you don't need a contributor agreement because everything is covered by the editor agreement. But when it comes to the sort of primary relationship in that scenario, it's between the editor and the publisher, and then the contributors kind of, you know, are reporting to the editor. Did that answer that question, or did I go off on a tangent?
Yeah, thanks a lot.
No worries.
We have another question?
I can't hear you, so.
closer.
Hi, Fran, this is Katarina.
Oh, hi, Katarina. Hi, lovely to meet you.
Yes, I just want to, it's a great coincidence that I'm here and you're there, and I just wanted to bring my experience with you because I'm in this process. I'm about to submit my final writing, and so I'm working on my book about my dissertation, and I was in touch with Fran over last year, and then I went through all the process. And I just wanted to tell everybody how easy it was, how important it, well, in general, I think it's important to publish your dissertation. I'm not any PhD student, but it helps to keep developing your ideas. And so the PhD stops, but then from there you start, from your findings, and your book is actually the development of your findings. So it's actually very important to bring your, extra work out to the world. And then obviously my experience with Fran was amazing. It was really easy and linear, I would say, right? So we went through all the steps that Lina was showing. And it also, I found, I'm not working with you, Fran, anymore, but working with Julia, and she's so nice. We're in touch, and we keep I gave her updates, and it was very simple, and I'm very excited to finish and submit.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
so much.
really nice.
It's really kind, and you're missing absolutely nothing in Oxford. It's pouring here. I bet it's nice. I wish we were there.
We are in a beautiful weather, and the sun is amazing.
Oh.
Yeah, we're happy we're here.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I wanted to circle back around to the question about edited volume, which you raised, because so my second book was an edited volume, and I had all of the authors in mind before I submitted the proposal. I don't think my nerves could have handled trying to find authors after submitting the proposal, because if you write people and they say no because people are overcommitted, then you're trying to go down a list of who else could cover. So my advice would be to have all of your ducks in a row and have the authors already on board. So confirm with them ahead of time that they are interested in your project and interested in writing, and then submit the proposal with all the names. I have reviewed proposals that did not have all the names in. They said, well, I'm thinking of having this person or that person. But if they're big names, if they cannot do it because they have a timeline, right, then it really becomes problematic. You might have 2 or 3 names in mind, but if all of them say no, then what's your plan B? So I always admired the proposals that had a list of potential names. I always thought, I don't know if I would be so courageous as to do something like that.
The editors with the for an edited book first before you start lining people up.
Yeah, that's very helpful too. They, at least the editors that I work with at Routledge, they were always very thankful for doing that. One of the editors I worked with actually sent me a whole packet of do's and don'ts and everything from how to do academic writing and just a lot of information. So that was actually quite helpful. My impression was that the editors do appreciate it if you reach out early on and start taking the idea.
Yeah, very much so. And then, if it's something that we just don't think is going to fit for us, we can, always guide you to other publishers. And, it's good. We're more than happy to just receive an email with ideas, and then we can, go from there, really.
No, sorry, I don't know if I was in the back of my head. So does anyone else have a question?
I do have a question follow up to that, which is to say, supposing a material is in the writing phase but has not been submitted, what is, roughly speaking, the process from submission, that writing phase where maybe an author is personally ready to, is already writing? How long would that be? Is it like 6 months, a month, whatever length of time it takes to go through the process of publishing?
Can you just clarify the question? So was it how long is the writing period from acceptance to delivery?
Sort of like if the author, the author feels like he's in the writing phase, but has not submitted a proposal yet. So all those steps, roughly speaking, how much time?
Oh, I see. Do you want to take this, Lydia? Or?
Sorry, I can't really
Yeah,
hear.
okay. For the proposal to hopeful acceptance, if the reviews are pretty straightforward, the reviewing is the big hurdle there. So if the reviews come back and are pretty much positive, but are saying, you know, I think you should consider changing this and this, but otherwise it looks good, then that will be not a hurdle. You know, we'll send that feedback to you, we'll discuss it, consider how to incorporate it. So assuming that would be the case, then it can be as little as 3 months from proposal. Review, say, takes 4 to 6 weeks, and then it takes a week or two for the editor to go through it all, send it back to you, and then move to the publishing board and present you with the contract. So it can be very quick. But if the reviews throw up more problematic questions around the project, then that's going to slow it down a lot. And so, you know, there's a project that's just going forward, and that took about 6 months because it had to be revised and then resubmitted. So it's really the reviewing that kind of answers that question, but it can be very quick.
Many more.
Less of a technical question, but more in terms of, since you've been at Routledge, have there been kind of, I'm just interested in some of the shifts that you've been seeing in topics, interest, or shifts in the, you know, in the kinds of books that you're publishing from, you know, over your time, as a kind of interesting to know.
Yeah. So I joined Routledge in 2008. So it's 14 years this year. So you know, a good amount of time has passed. I think there are kind of evergreen subjects that have kind of, you know, we've perpetually published on, you know, structures, building types, you know, history and theory books. I think a trend that we've seen a lot more since about 2015 onwards is many more books kind of questioning what architecture is and the direction of the profession. I mean, books that are really kind of looking quite fundamentally at very big questions for the subject. And I think, you know, when I started, that wasn't so much a thing, and that's really very much a thing now. And I think whilst we've always published on issues around sustainability and climate change, and there's an urgency to that now, which is, you know, palpable in the kind of projects that we're getting. I think also, you know, the publishing is, you know, can be very siloed. And one of the issues that we face is kind of how to break down the barriers of academic publishing so that the books that we publish aren't just in a kind of echo chamber, but actually can make a bit of a difference to the sort of wider world. And that's something probably my whole career, and I'm in my 20th year of publishing now, I've kind of been mulling over and thinking about, but I feel like that's very much a kind of an industry issue that comes about because of, you know, where we are in the history of the world. So, you know, that's maybe a kind of nerdy personal interest, but I think there's that sense of you know, amongst architects and architecture, that, you know, there's greater relevancy to be had by the rest of the world from the work that people like yourself do. And I think that's something that academic publishing has a part to play in that. But obviously that happens at a much larger scale than just, you know, myself and Lydia.
There's a question in the chat box. Can the writing sample be something that's already been published, like a position paper or essay that is catalyst for the book, or must it be new material written specifically for this book? Yeah, so it can be a writing sample from something else that's been published. Ideally, it would be for the book, but we can be flexible. I mean, yeah, like I said, it's kind of just to give a flavor of how you write and what you the kind of work that you're doing. So yes, it can be previously published material.
So I have a question. In like an ideal situation, do you prefer an author to contact you prior to putting together the proposal or after? Before? So just like contacting you saying, this is my idea. I have like a couple of stages and work with you to put together the proposal.
I don't really have a preference. I think it's good to get an opportunity to kind of shape the proposal a little bit before you complete it. So maybe I would say contact us with an idea and a general kind of shape for the book, but maybe not the sample material, so that we can comment on whether we think it's got potential as it is or whether it should change. But yeah, I mean, it really depends. I don't know what you think, Fran.
Yeah, sorry. I'm very happy just to receive a kind of email giving the outline, saying what I've got in mind, and then we can say, yeah, that sounds great. You know, do crack on with the author proposal. So, you know, and sometimes even we kind of jump the gun and say, oh, well, I can see the potential issues with that might be, or if it's, you know, on something that we've just published on, like, oh, how does it differ from this? You can get some of those sort of conversations done first before you've put in the effort. Yeah, just get in touch. It's our job to answer such emails, and we're happy to.
Excellent, great, thank you.
Who would people submit? This is, does anyone else have any questions? Otherwise, I've got one last one. Okay, go ahead. Can I answer? Yeah.
This is just, I'm trying to think about how to advise. In recent mentoring discussions, young faculty have asked about, let's say some chapter that they want for a potential book that's been published as a journal article. And they've asked about how to, you know, how publishers, you know, how much rewriting of work is, let's say, a previous journal article to turn it into a book chapter. Is there a kind of general sense of advice, theory, mentoring that you know we can give to faculty?
I think it really depends on who the audience for the book is going to be. So, you know, I think if the article's kind of going into a research book, then you're aiming it at a very similar audience, and so, you know, it can be very similar in its form. I think if the idea behind the book is that it's read by, you know, some students at different levels, then probably there needs to be some rewriting there that just kind of, you know, pulls back on some aspects that's appropriate for a journal, but less so for that audience. So I think it probably depends what the overall aims of the book are, and then you can kind of tailor it for its intended audience. You know, permissions issues notwithstanding with various journals.
I'll ask one really practical last question, and that is, who should people contact if they are interested in submitting a proposal now? Do you still have someone in New York for those that are based in the US, or should we submit to someone in UK, or how does it work?
Yeah, so it's Lydia.
Lydia
Yeah.
is now the person. Okay.
Yeah.
I took the role over from someone who was in New York, but yeah, because everything's kind of virtual now, I'm in the UK. But yeah,
Right.
my remit's still the US.
Okay. So thank you very much. I think we're at time, and it's probably your tea time now. So thank you very, very much for a super interesting presentation, and thanks for all the questions too. I think, you know, this is sort of the first step towards hopefully a lot of great new books getting out the door with Routledge.
It's wonderful. We're so grateful for being invited. It's a real treat, and
Yeah.
hopefully at some point we can come in person again.
Yeah, maybe next year.
Well, thank you very much. And I know that a lot of the books I read are published by Routledge, so that says something, you know, too, as a publishing house, we definitely have a market amongst us. So, okay. Your email, Lydia, do you have that on the screen?
Yeah, I did have it. Where can I put it?
You want to put it in the chat?
Yeah, it's just
We can't see it on the chat though. We can't see the chat.
oh, hang on. Sorry.
Or if you want to verbally say it, we will put it on the whiteboard back here. Oh wait, we can see the chat now. All right.
I don't know if you can see the screen.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, there it is.
It's just my name with a dot and @tnf.co.uk. I think it's on routledge.com as well. It's somewhere on there.
And Lydia's name is in the program too. So actually both Fran and Lydia are in the program. Everyone's using smartphone notation feature right now to take a picture of that. All right, thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks, Anja. Thanks, everyone. Bye, Katarina.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.